So you might be wondering, what has she been doing for these 3 weeks? Whew. It has been a time. I shared with you the last time I was here that I was taking on a part-time job. Right, y'all remember that? So I started the job, and I had 3 full days. It's a part-time job, almost full-time. Had my 3 full days, then I had a day off, and then I went into this 9-day immersion experience at the River Phoenix Center for Peacebuilding, which is where I'm working. So it was really great timing that I got this opportunity to be really immersed in the work and what it is that I'm going to be doing and what we want to replicate, what we want to be doing here in Ocala. And they called it an immersion. They could have called it an intensive because it was very intense. 9 days back and forth to Gainesville all day long. Very emotional. It felt like a roller coaster ride. There were times when we were just like really on a high, and then you would just go down into the depths of sadness and hearing people's stories and pain, and then come back up. And all of us had our roller coasters going, so we were all going at different times, at different rates. But it was an amazing experience, and I'm going to try to encapsulate as much as I can what my takeaways were from that experience. Then went straight from that, had a day off, which was enough time to do laundry and nap, and then go right back to work. And then this past weekend was TEDx Ocala, which I saw at least one of our people was there at TEDx, and I was the MC for that event as well. So it's just been a whirlwind. In these 3 weeks, I've, like I said, 1 day off, and this week's not looking much better. but it has been a joy, and it has been an amazing ride. So I just want to share with you some of those takeaways from that experience. So my job is as the training coordinator and developer of curriculum and programs for the River Phoenix Center for Peacebuilding. And what we do is lots of different things, lots of programs, but mainly it's about engaging community in peace-building principles, which are things like not just community, but individuals as well. Things like mindfulness, conflict transformation, restorative justice practices, social emotional learning, and effective communication. All these various pieces. And in Gainesville, they have been at this now for 5 years. So have a really extensive program in place, and they have engaged their community in ways that are just incredible. To have the school system on board with these programs, to have the judicial system on board is just, I think, incredible. So I'm taking this opportunity to learn everything I can and bring everything I can back here to Ocala and see how we can institute these programs. So the first 3 days were spent basically getting my feet wet, learning the Google Drive and learning who's who and where to find the people, the go-tos and all of that. And then we had the immersion. And the immersion, over those 9 days, we were exposed to different parts of the program. The core of who went through that program was about 15 of us, and they represented 6 different countries. There were 2 ladies there from Australia, there was a woman from Israel, there was one from Bosnia-Herzegovina, the Philippines, South Africa, and of course the Americans. I don't know if I left anyone out. It's Bosnia and Israel, right? So, again, just a fascinating time. So, the day before going into this immersion, I led the memorial service for my cousin, one of my first cousins who passed away earlier in the month. So I went into the experience with that, having gotten my feet wet at River Phoenix. And then all of these experiences, as I said, they all kind of dovetailed. There were some themes that came out of this time. I want to share with you. My brain is a little bit, there's so much stuff. There's so much stuff that I went through and so many things that I want to share with you. The toughest thing about today was to figure out how much do I share, which pieces of it are going to be most impactful, and what's going to be the great takeaway for you. So there are commonalities that I saw, and certainly overarching themes. And when you get people together from different countries and people very diverse backgrounds, you see a lot of the differences. But we spent a lot of time together, so we got to also see some of the commonalities. And one of the saddest things, one of the most difficult things for me, is seeing and recognizing the breadth of some of the social issues and problems that are facing this country. You know, for all of us. You know, I feel like I've been kind of cloistered here in the Center for Spiritual Living, where you all come on Sunday mornings, and everybody's vibrating at a little bit higher level. You know, we're all on this path to higher consciousness, so we've done a lot of the work, and so most of you are bright, shiny, happy people. If not all the time, at least some of the time, I see you all as the lights in your communities. Well, now I'm out in the bigger community, and one of my duties is to go into the school system and share these ideas. So I'm with teachers and people who, you know, regular folks just doing their jobs. And one of the things that has been so sad for me is to find out how miserable some of these people are just in their day-to-day lives. You know, there are teachers in classrooms that are teaching our children that really don't like what they're doing, or they don't feel like they're supported. You know, or they're in buildings that are falling apart and the paint is, you know, these places haven't been painted in years, and they don't look any better than the prison that I've been visiting for the past 3 years. I'm really just stunned. You know, I know not all of the schools are like that, certainly, but to imagine that these poor people with as little support as they have trying to just make a go of it, you know, it's difficult. It's difficult. They don't know if they're going to have a job next year. You know, one of the schools I'm at has like an F rating, and if they don't bring it out, teachers are going to get fired. The feds come in next year. I mean, it's like, you wonder, you know, how they even get up in the morning to do this work. And then there's the things that happen in the classroom that are just mind-boggling to me. You know, to hear that there are teachers who are teaching from the door in case they have to make a quick exit. That's the kind of fear that we're talking about. Now, certainly this is not every place, and as I said, I'm in these particular schools because there are problems already. So I'm seeing it, and maybe it's anecdotal, but as you watch the news and you hear other people's stories, it feels like, there's really something going on here. So that has been very surprising to me. And then to be with people from other countries and hear that it's not just here. It's not just here. You know, the young lady from Bosnia talked about being a child and being at the park and playing and life just as a kid one day, and the next day everything changed. There's war, and it's been war ever since. You know, and we were out at one point during the retreat in our circle outside in the woods in Micanopy, in this just beautiful, beautiful property where Hart Phoenix and her husband Jeffrey live. And there's a lake, and it's just beautiful, idyllic. Somebody was doing either target practice or maybe shooting turkeys or something, so we heard gunfire. And you could see the woman from Bosnia was like, what was that? And the young man who just moved from Brooklyn is like, do we need to run inside? I mean, when you hear gunfire in Brooklyn, right, you better get indoors. And everyone was just sitting around kind of relaxed, you know. So you realize everybody brings their stuff, their background, their baggage, their pain, their everything. And those are some of the commonalities that we have as human beings, right? Is that everybody, we all hurt, you know. We all have hopes and dreams, and we have families and people we love, and we come here with gifts that we want to give, you know, and then there's the world and all of its pain and its drama and all of this. And then yesterday, so to go on, I don't want to get you all depressed, but just kind of, I will pull you out of this, I promise. Yesterday, one of the themes that emerged in TEDx had to do with trauma, with childhood trauma. That was one of the big things. And restorative justice. And all of these things that I've been talking about, and this new position that I'm in, everything just kind of went boom, dovetailed. And I want to share with you some of the statistics that I heard that were also quite mind-boggling. Okay, the year 2017, this is information you can find online, brought the deadliest mass shooting in modern history of the United States, which has become home to more gun massacres than any other country in the world. Let's see. So a mass shooting means that it's 4 people or more that have been killed. And the U.S., of course, leads the world in that. From 1949 to 2015, only 23% of the incidents were attributed to people who were mentally ill. The one thing that was common in almost all of these situations, does anyone know? What's the one commonality? Well, besides the gun, besides that, was not mental illness, actually. Only about a quarter of those people were certifiably or identifiably mentally ill.
Anger.
The one commonality, yes, anger is one of them, but the other one is that they are almost all men. Almost all men. 96% of the murders that happen worldwide are committed by men. Did y'all realize that? And think about all these shooters that we've had in our country. They have all been young men, angry men. That blew my mind. I've got to see if there's any of these other statistics. We're talking about the percentage of people that are imprisoned worldwide. Now, the United States has 5% of the world's population, and 25% of the people incarcerated worldwide right here in the United States. Right? And we have a system that really is not working well, either in our schools or in our prisons. We have what's called a punitive system, right? It's all about punishment, about punishing people. And so we're seeing that this is not working. This is not working. What is it that's happened? So my question is then, what's happening to our men? How is it that, if it was mental illness, if that was the issue, if that was the cause for all of these shootings, the percentage of women that have some form of mental illness is actually higher than it is for men. So you would expect that it would be women then that were committing these crimes, if in fact it is mental illness that's the issue. But it's not. It's not. There's something else. There's something else that's going on. And I felt like going into the immersion, I had my answer. And it came the evening I did my cousin's memorial service. Now, my cousin was a year younger than me. And when we were growing up, we were kids together, we ran around more together, and then we went separate ways. But what I remember of my cousin was just this sweet, sweet boy with a page boy haircut that was just quiet and sensitive and kind and you wanted to take care of him. You wanted to take care of him. Now, he was my aunt that had him was 16 years old when she gave birth to him. So, as you imagine, there are some challenges that go in with being born to a teen mom. His father was in the picture. However, his dad was an alcoholic. And it was enough of a problem that this man was dead before he was 30. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that there was probably some trauma there. You have to do quite a bit of drinking to die from alcoholism before you're 30. Yes? Would you agree? Now, these are things we didn't know this, when we were coming up. But what we understand now is that these incidents create trauma in our lives. So I don't know what else my cousin went through. I have no idea. I know that he went into the military, that he was very devoted to serving this country, that he was a very principled individual, that he raised 6 kids that loved him dearly. And he actually was living in Ocala when he passed away. He got up on a Saturday morning and told his wife he wasn't feeling good, so I'm going to go back to bed, which he did. And his wife made breakfast, and when she came back to get him for breakfast, he was gone. So we had the service within the week. That was on Friday before the immersion. And one after another, it was right here actually in this room, one after another, the men in his life, his sons and his stepsons, got up and talked about what an amazing presence he was in their lives and how much they loved him. And they all said a variation of the same thing, but the one that just stabbed my heart was the one who stood up here and said, I'm dying inside. I'm dying inside from the pain. But I'm not going to cry, because I'm going to be strong. I'm going to be strong like Dad would want me to be strong. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's what killed my cousin. That's what killed him. That's what's killing our men. That's what's driving them to kill others. Is this false belief, this BS, this nonsense that we have been told in our culture, not just here in the United States, but all over the world, that there is something wrong with expressing our emotion. There is something wrong with you if you feel sad and you cry. That's what we tell ourselves. That's what we tell our men. Right? What do we say if a man cries? Man up. Right? Stiff upper lip. We start when they're little. Boys don't cry. And what is the result of that? What is the result of that?
Pent-up emotion.
Pent-up emotion. We're like pressure cookers. That emotion, that pain, all of that has to go someplace. If they don't blow up and spread their pain on the people around them, they're turning it in. They're turning it in, and it's causing all kinds of havoc in our bodies. It's causing havoc throughout all of our systems, right? From school system on. I mean, it just goes on and on. So it's a problem. It's a huge problem. And that was one of the TED Talks yesterday. Was a gentleman who spoke about this, who was in a school where there was an active shooter, you know, and the terror that went with that. And he is now on a crusade to share these principles of social emotional intelligence and peace building and conflict transformation, all of these things, so that we can, you know, we need to do better by our youth. We need to do better by the generations that are coming up next. So I promised you I was not going to leave you in that sad place, but this is the state. This is what we're seeing. You know, we see it on the news at night. We hear these things. But now, being outside and people in their regular day-to-day life, I'm actually seeing the pervasiveness of it. The pervasiveness of it. But like you all, I have been through my stuff. How many people here have been through some challenges, some trials and tribulations? Right? We all have. We all have. Every single one of us has a story. And we all have the resilience that has brought us through those situations, each and every one of us. Now, you may not know what those things are, but I assure you, you have the skills, or you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be here. But what our work is, what my work is to help you to see what are those things, what are those pieces of resiliency, what are those things that have helped you survive, so that you can lean on those when you need them, so that you can teach those things to other people. That's what we're about. So I want to show you a little video. It's just a minute and a half of what this work is with the River Phoenix Center for Peacebuilding, all of those parts that go into peace building, and then I'm going to share some of the upside of what I saw. There's supposed to be sound. Can you bring it back? Shannon, can you bring it back? Just pause it. Full screen and bring it back. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I don't know if you saw the last piece because it runs kind of fast. One of those last slides, it said, what if conversation could end violence, injustice, cruelty, and intolerance? What if? Just simple conversation could do that. Does anyone believe that's possible? It is absolutely possible. I've seen it. I've experienced it. This is not difficult stuff. It is not difficult. It does take a strength of character, a kind of a fortitude to be able to do this work, but it is absolutely possible. The first piece is that effective communication and social emotional learning. Effective communication and social emotional learning. What goes into social emotional learning? I've been teaching on this now for the past year, at least for 6 months. It is your self-awareness. It has to do with your understanding of yourself and what makes you tick. Right? What is it that motivates you? What is it that moves you? What is it that causes you pain? What brings you joy? It's knowing yourself. It's knowing who you are without the influence of the stuff, right? Of the medicines, of all those things that we can be addicted to, right? Of shopping, of working, of substances of every kind, of our devices, right? All those kinds of addictions, they keep us from that self-awareness, from knowing who we are. But this is vital to our functioning, to our effective functioning in the world, is self-awareness. The next thing is social awareness. Right? So you understand yourself. Now you can be aware of the people around you and the effect that you have on them and how they affect you. When you understand that, how much more effective can you be in life when you understand that? It has to do with responsible decision making. That's what social emotional learning is about, responsible decision making. Do y'all remember the quote that I've shared, the Viktor Frankl quote? Between stimulus and response, do you remember? There is a space. And in that space is your power to choose your response. And in that response lies your freedom and your growth. We teach spiritual practices here and self-awareness to expand that space between stimulus and response. So understanding yourself, understanding others, that allows you to make responsible decisions. Social emotional learning has to do with those relationship skills, and then with managing those in yourself and the relationships with others, especially for those of us who are in any kind of a leadership position, whether we're parents or teachers or people who, maybe you have folks that work for you. All of these are important pieces. And within that, we have empathy, which is the biggest thing, probably, is the idea or feeling what other people feel, understanding what other people are going through. That's what empathy is all about. Reflection, resiliency, and collaborating with other people. So social emotional intelligence, it is vital that we each have some kind of literacy in this. And this isn't things that most of us were taught when we were kids. Right? Most of us learned this through trial and error in the school of hard knocks of life. But now we know there are people who get along well, who play well with others. There are people who are social emotionally intelligent, and we know what goes into that, and we can teach it to other people. We can teach it to teeny tiny children. The next thing, this is one of the things that was very, very clear to me in this 3 weeks, is that we are to embrace conflict, not run from it. The person who is one of the founders of this movement we call restorative justice said, rather than being dangerous, conflict holds within it vital messages regarding unmet needs and areas of necessary change. Given this understanding, safety then is increased not by avoiding conflict, but by moving toward it with the intention of hearing the messages within. Now, last week, I know Reverend Maria used an acronym for fear that I had never heard before. Anyone else? Anyone remember it? Face everything and rise, right? Face everything and rise. We are, I think, naturally afraid of conflict. I don't know, is there anyone in this room that likes conflict? Raise your hand if you like conflict. I'll put mine down because I've spent the great vast majority of my life avoiding it at all costs. Because it's not fun, it doesn't feel good, it doesn't feel good. But we need to do this kind of mind-changing thing. One of the games we played during the immersion was a game where, you might remember this when you were kids, where you take something and you switch up the meaning of it. So every time you hear stop, it means go. And when you say go, it means stop. So everybody's walking in circles. Imagine how much fun that was. Every time they say stop, you're supposed to go. And every time they say go, you stop. So it really messes with your head. And then it's like freeze and move. So they threw in like 4 or 5 different moves, and we were all bumping into each other. And it was a lot of fun. But it had me think of this idea that we need to change our thinking about conflict and the fear that we have around it. And instead, see conflict as an opportunity for greater understanding, for greater awareness. We are to lean into the conflict so that we can extract what's there for us, what that conflict is trying to show us. And you know, it's not fun. It's not always fun to move into that, but it's necessary. It is so necessary, and I'm seeing that more and more and more. We're not getting anywhere by avoiding these situations, either within ourselves or our interpersonal relationships. We need to be moving in, leaning in with the skills of social emotional intelligence that we all have. So leaning into the conflict, embrace the conflict, lean into that fear, and remember that acronym. Face everything and rise. Face everything and rise. The other thing that also is so important is this idea of our community and our loved ones. And maybe your community is just your family. Maybe you have a little circle of friends. I hope and pray that each one of you feels like you have go-to people. So when you're going through these difficult emotions, when you're leaning into that conflict, and you need a soft place to land, those people can hold you in that love. The reason that Immersion was such a roller coaster was because we were talking about traumas, and we were talking about war, and we were talking about all this really heavy stuff, and people were hitting their peaks and valleys at different times. But we created a safe space. It was a safe space so that people could do that. So that people felt like they needed to cry, they could cry. You know, if they needed to get up and stomp or whatever, they had the space to do that. And they were loved in that space. Everything in our training happened around this idea of circles. People sitting in circles. Now that is as ancient as days. Like, people have been gathering in circle. Native people did it. We had a circle. This was probably one of the high points of the training that we did. And it was a police youth dialogue, where we gather police officers from all over Alachua County. It was Alachua County Sheriff's Office, Gainesville PD. I think there might have been some people from the university. And then a group of kids. Now, Gainesville, I thought this was also very interesting. Gainesville has one of the highest racial disparity rates in Florida. And Florida is one of the highest in the country. What I mean by that is that African Americans make up 1/3 of the population in Gainesville, but they represent 80% of people being arrested. That's a problem, don't you think?
Yes, it's a problem.
That's a problem. And that's not really very different than what's happening anywhere else. So there is money that's been allocated to investigate this, what's going on with this. And this is where the idea for the police youth dialogue came. So you take police officers and you take people from the underprivileged areas that they serve. And you know, none of the officers live in those areas, right? So these are people that would not mingle unless it's because of a law enforcement call. right? You understand that? So we get a group of 12 kids and we get a group of 12 officers, and at first they start out in separate rooms, and they come up with all of the stereotypes that they have for one another. So the police are telling you all the stereotypes about teenage kids, and the teenage kids are telling you all the stereotypes about the officers. And after they do all of that, we bring the groups together. And then we play a little game, and it's a fun game. This game was called As the Wind Blows. I think I played it with some folks in the congregation at one of our workshops. You have a person who stands in the middle, you got a circle of people, and the person in the middle obviously doesn't have a chair. And what they do is they share something personal about themselves. And if it relates to anyone else in the room, people get up from their chairs and they run and they have to find another seat, which means somebody's going to be left without a seat, right? Because the person in the middle is trying to get a seat too. So the one who's in the middle now has to share some other story, something else about themselves. So it may start out with, the wind blows if you're an oldest child. The wind blows if you love the Bucks. The wind blows if you've ever tried marijuana. Then one of the officers says, the wind blows if you've ever done something that could get you arrested. And when the kids see all the cops get up and run out of their seats, it's like, what? The funniest one was the wind blows, we have children here. The wind blows if you ever had a relationship with someone other than your significant other. And that was fun to see who got up out of their seats for that one. And of course you say, what happens here stays here. This is a safe place. But anyway, it's great fun. You see people's humanity. People are laughing. So the kids and the cops are laughing. They're having a good time. And that exercise is done, and then they bust out the lists. So the kids get to see what the officers think of them, and the officers get to see what the kids think of them. So at the top of the kids' list for the officers is words like a-hole. Y'all know that word? Lots of unflattering words, but perhaps the most unflattering was the word killer. And as you can imagine what that did to the officers, I didn't know what it was going to do to me. I come from a family of law enforcement. To see that, people think someone goes into law enforcement to kill people. There are kids that think that. And where do they get that idea? Where do they get it? I mean, name it, right? Social media, the news, their friends, their family. I thought, I can't do these circles if this is the kind of stuff people are going to say about each other. You know, it's hard to lean into that pain. You know, but the officers had an opportunity to answer to that. You know, you get a young officer, maybe 30 years old, who says, you know, I didn't become a police officer to kill people. How could you think that? How could you think that? And so the conversation went on for a half day. The kids had an opportunity to sit with an officer, and they got to talk about their lives and to share and to see one another as human beings. And after all of those exercises, they all came back, and they were laughing, and they were joking, and they were hugging, and everyone had made new friends. Can a conversation make a difference? Can a conversation stop violence, cruelty, injustice? Absolutely. Bishop Desmond Tutu says this: Africans have a thing called Ubuntu. Has anyone ever heard that word, Ubuntu? We believe that a person is a person through other people. We are who we are through our relationships with others. Thank you. That my humanity is caught up, bound up inextricably with yours. When I dehumanize you, I dehumanize myself. The solitary human being is a contradiction in terms. The solitary human being is a contradiction in terms. None of us is solitary. Whether we want to be or think we are all always connected. And what we do affects the people in our lives. None of us is solitary. Therefore, you seek to work for the common good because your humanity comes into its own in community. Your humanity comes into its own in community, in our belonging. I'm going to read it one more time so you hear the whole thing. Africans have a thing called Ubuntu. We believe that a person is a person through other persons, that my humanity is caught up, bound up inextricably with yours. When I dehumanize you, I dehumanize myself. The solitary human being is a contradiction in terms. Therefore, you seek to work for the common good because your humanity comes to its own in community, in belonging. Now, there's an anthropologist who tells the story of Ubuntu, that he was studying an African tribe, and before he left, he wanted to leave them a gift. So he created a basket, and it had all this fruit and goodies, and he told this group of children, okay, here's the starting line. Whoever gets to the finish line first gets the basket. And what did the children do? They held hands, and they ran together. They ran to the finish line together. And the anthropologist said, well, any one of you could have won. Why did you go together? And the children said, how can I be happy if everyone else is not happy? We are all in this together. The stakes are very high. And I look to this group, I look to these people, those of you who are listening, right, as those lights, as the people who can make the change. Each and every one of you has a sphere of influence that no one else has. So it's up to you. You know the message now. You've heard this. People out there don't know. But it's for us to be that example. It's for us to be that compassion. It's for us to be that empathetic ear. It's for us to create that safe space for people to show up with their pain and their drama and whatever it is that they've got going. Just like you do once in a while, right? Be that safe place for someone else to land. Ernest Holmes said this, compassion and caring are the ties that bind us together in mutual understanding and in the unified attempt to uncover the divinity in each other. Compassion is the most gentle of human virtues, for it is the outpouring of the divine givingness through all. Care, compassion, empathy. Have a conversation with somebody who doesn't look like you. Maybe pick up the phone and call that person that you've had that conflict with and lean into it. See what there is for you in that conversation. Maybe there's new understanding. And you know, when you move through all of that, it was another one of the commonalities. You give people the space to show up where they are, how they are in their pain, and they work through it. And when they come out on the other side, it's like another human being almost. You know, they're lighter, they're smiling, right? They feel better, like they can go out and run, you know, and just run and run because the burdens have been lifted. It's so worth it. I saw it in face after face after face as we went through that immersion, and everyone went through their ups and downs. We just moved through it. Instead of stopping the emotion, instead of saying this isn't right, I'm not supposed to do that, don't look at me cry, it's the ugly cry. No, just move through it. Move through it. But find yourself a safe place to do that. And if you don't have it out there, then we'll find your practitioner, we'll find your minister, right? So that you can move through that stuff, those conflicts within yourself and interpersonally. Is this helpful for anybody?